In this section of our tutorial, we're going to be taking a look at how to get MIDI data recorded into Ableton Live. Now, we're starting with a new live set, so if you want to follow along, go File, New, Live Set. Whenever we do that, we see one empty audio track and one empty MIDI track already in place. Let's select the audio track and delete it with the delete key, and now we have a single MIDI track. To look at the configuration of Ableton Live in relationship to the MIDI inputs, let's go to Live and then pull down till you see Preferences and click on that. Now as we look for MIDI information coming into Ableton Live, we're only interested in getting it to a track. So we're going to be focusing in on this column right here of what is being turned on in terms of MIDI to make its way to any track. Now over to the left we see we have three inputs coming from a pad control, which is a Korg drum pad. Below that we have three more inputs from the Novation Remote SL keyboard. And then below that we have one MIDI input coming off my audio interface, which I'm not using, so I'm going to turn that one off. So that's basically what we want to focus in on, which inputs, MIDI inputs, actually have a device hooked up. Let's enable those to get to a track. Okay, once we've got that set, let's close the preferences. And now we can actually play our MIDI devices. I'm going to record enable this track just so we can see some movement. As I play my keyboard, we see that it is coming in for sure, and the same thing with my drum pad. Now we're not hearing any sound because this is an empty MIDI track. Let's load in a device now. If you will, click on your device browser up here in the upper left hand corner. If it's opened up, double click. We're going to Instruments, and then we're coming down to Simpler. I'm going to open up Simpler's folder with that triangle, and then I'm going to choose a simple string sound, opening that folder up, and then double clicking on String Machine. And now we see the String Machine is in place. Again, I'm going to double click on this to reset it and hide my browser. Now once we've created a MIDI track, whether it's empty or not, again we're listening to any MIDI coming in from all the MIDI inputs we enabled. And it's also going to look for any MIDI channel if you know what that means. So this is a great default for any MIDI track. It means basically if MIDI is coming in, it will go to this track, and when we're record enabled we'll get that. Let's play the keyboard again. And now my drum pads. So either one is controlling that. Now let's go a step further and create a new empty MIDI track. Insert, right click, and insert MIDI track. So now we have two. Let's go back to our device browser, click on it here, come back into the Instruments folder, and let's go down to Impulse. If I double click on Impulse again, I'll get an empty impulse over here in that track. To get to the presets again, all we have to do is enable that hot swap button here, and when we have an empty track it takes us immediately to the impulse that's empty, so we get the presets for that device. Let's unfold the acoustic set and go for the basic all-purpose drum kit here. So double clicking on that creates the drum kit for the all-purpose kit. Now again, if I play my keyboard or my drum pads, either track will record those. Now let's take that a step further. I'm going to hide my browser. I'm going to say for this String Machine, only listen to the input coming from my remote keyboard. Now that's the name of my keyboard. It's a Remote SL Novation keyboard. So now when I play that, I'm just going to do this singly now. Clicking there without the Command key, and we get a sound. But if I play my drum pads now, we see there's no response because I told this track to only listen to MIDI coming in from the keyboard. I'm going to pull my master volume here just to make sure you can hear my voice. Coming back now to all purpose, I'm going to tell it to listen to only the input coming from the pad control. And I'm going to play it to see if we have motion. It's not coming in on pad control A. We'll check port 2. And now we see meter movement here. Now if I add in the Command key while I click on this, again it lets me select more than one track for record arming. Let's listen. Here's the drum pads, and here's the keyboard. So this is the correct way I would want this. I would want my keyboard to go to the string type sound and my drum pads to go directly to the impulse drum machine. So we see that Ableton Live makes it very easy to get MIDI up and running, and then as you learn a bit more you can map the MIDI devices that are currently recognized by Ableton Live directly into the tracks that you may have, and you can have more than one armed at the same time. This can be especially helpful if you have several people in the room playing at the same time. So if you have a keyboardist, a MIDI guitar, and a MIDI drum pad, or multiple keyboards, you can route each individual device to its own track with its own sound making device and volume levels, etc. Okay, this concludes our look at how to get MIDI configured and also how to get the tracks armed and ready for recording MIDI and then independently responding to independent MIDI inputs.